The bartender warned me about the regulars. He said they never leave. I should have listened. My name is DeShawn Reyes, 38 years old, former cop, former soldier. Now I mop floors at a dive bar in Brooklyn called Last Round. Not exactly where I thought I'd end up, but life has a way of humbling you. The bottle will do that. The nightmares will do that too. I took the night cleaning job 6 months ago, midnight to 6 a.m. Perfect for someone who doesn't sleep much anyway. The pay was decent, the work was simple, and most importantly, nobody asked questions. In a neighborhood where everyone has secrets, that's worth more than overtime. Last Round sits on the corner of 5th and Union, squeezed between a laundromat and a convenience store that's been robbed 4 times this year. The bar has operated for over 70 years, serving cheap whiskey and cheaper beer to dock workers, cab drivers, and people like me who just want to disappear for a while. The place looks exactly like you'd expect. Cracked leather stools worn smooth by countless bodies, walls stained yellow from decades of cigarette smoke, and a jukebox that only plays songs from the 80s. The kind of establishment where everyone knows your name, but nobody asks where you've been. But there's something else about Last Round, something that gnaws at me more than the sticky floors or the broken air conditioning. It's the regulars. They're unnaturally consistent, too consistent. Take Eddie, for instance. Middle-aged guy, always sits at the end of the bar. Nurses the same whiskey, neat for hours. Been coming here for 20 years. According to the day bartender, same stool, same drink, same tired expression. Never ages a single day. Or Maria, Hispanic woman, early 30s, always orders vodka cranberry, sits in the corner booth, stares at her phone, never actually uses it. Tommy the bartender swears she's been coming here since before smartphones existed. Still looks exactly 32. Then there's Frank, construction worker, built like a brick wall, drinks beer straight from the bottle. According to the owner, Frank's been a regular since the early 2000s, still wears the same Yankees cap, same work boots, same flannel shirt, never shows anywhere. This is a horror crime story with supernatural elements. What started as a simple cleaning job became something much darker, something that challenged everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the spaces in between. I'm telling you this because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand what really happens at Last Round after midnight, before I forget, before I become one of them. Subscribe and hit the bell notification. Tell me what time you're watching and what city you're from. You'll want to stay for this one. The first thing you notice about Last Round after closing is the silence. Not peaceful silence. Heavy, oppressive silence. The kind that makes your ears ring and your skin crawl, like the building itself is holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. I arrived at midnight, same as always. Jimmy, the closing bartender, handed me the keys. Without making eye contact, he never stayed longer than necessary. Most nights, he was gone before I even got my cleaning supplies out of the storage room. Regular crowd tonight, he muttered, gathering his jacket with nervous energy. Eddie stayed until last call. So did Maria and Frank. I nodded, not really listening. Jimmy always mentioned the regulars like they were weather patterns he needed to track. Part of the routine that kept this place running. The bar felt different that night. Heavier. The air was thick with something more than stale beer and cigarette residue. I'd been in enough dangerous situations to trust my instincts, and every instinct was screaming that something was terribly wrong.
I started with the usual routine. Collect glasses, wipe down tables, sweep the floor. The work was methodical, almost meditative. It helped quiet the dark thoughts that liked to visit during the quiet hours.
That's when I found Eddie's jacket. It was draped over his usual stool, still warm to the touch. A brown leather jacket, worn soft from years of use. The kind of jacket that becomes part of you, like a second skin. I'd seen Eddie wear it every single night for 6 months straight. He never left without it. Then I called out, thinking maybe he was in the bathroom. No response. My voice echoed strangely in the empty space. I checked the storage room, the office, even the basement, empty. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. The windows were too small for a grown man to fit through. Eddie was gone, but his jacket remained, still warm. I hung it behind the bar, figuring he'd come back for it. People leave things in bars all the time. Wallets, keys, phones. Usually they remember by morning and return in a panic. But as I continued cleaning, I noticed other things, disturbing things. Maria's purse was still in the corner booth, not forgotten on the table, but placed carefully in the seat, like she was saving her spot for when she returned. Frank's work gloves were on the bar, positioned exactly where his hands would rest during his nightly drinking routine. 3 regulars, 3 personal items, no people. But I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they left through a window I missed. Maybe there was another exit I didn't know about. Maybe Jimmy had let them out the back while I was getting supplies from my car. But 20 years of police work had taught me to trust evidence over explanations, and the evidence suggested something impossible, something that made my blood run cold. As I mopped the floor near the corner booth, I noticed something else. Scratches in the wood, deep gouges, like claw marks, fresh ones, the kind that would take considerable force to make, like someone had been fighting for their life.
I knelt down, examining them more closely. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, almost like words or symbols. Something deliberate and purposeful.
The scratches were still warm to the touch. I couldn't sleep that morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those scratches, felt that warm leather jacket, remembered the suffocating weight of the silence in that empty bar. By 3 p.m., I was back at last round. The day shift was in full swing. Different crowd, different energy. Sunlight streaming through dirty windows made everything look normal, almost reassuring. I found Tommy behind the bar, stocking bottles with mechanical precision. He'd been working days and last round for 15 years. If anyone knew the regulars and their patterns, it would be him. "Hey Tommy," I said, sliding onto a stool. "Can I ask you something about last night?" He looked up, wiping his hands on a bar towel. Tommy was the kind of bartender who remembered everyone's drink order and nobody's personal problems. Professional friendly. Nothing more. "Sure thing, DeShawn. What's eating at you?" Eddie, Maria, and Frank. They all left personal items behind. Jacket, purse, gloves. Tonight, they came back for them. Tommy's expression changed instantly. Subtle, but I caught it. A flicker of something dark. Fear, confusion, recognition. He glanced around the bar nervously, then leaned closer. "You found their stuff?" "Yeah, in their usual spots, like they just vanished into thin air." "That's..." Tommy paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's not the first time this has happened." He disappeared into the back room, returning with a cardboard box that looked like it had seen better days. Inside were dozens of personal items, wallets, keys, jewelry, clothing, all tagged with dates and names in faded ink. "Lost and found," Tommy explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Been collecting this stuff for years. People leave things behind, never come back for them.
I rifled through the box with growing unease. The dates went back decades. Some items looked brand new, despite being tagged from the 1990s. A leather wallet from 1994 still smelled fresh. A pair of sunglasses from 2001 showed no signs of wear or age.
Tommy, this doesn't make sense. These things should be deteriorated by now. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. But they're not. They're exactly the same as the day they were left behind. He pulled out a manila folder from beneath the register. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and handwritten notes, all related to missing persons cases in the neighborhood, all connected to last round. Started keeping track about 10 years ago, Tommy said, glancing around nervously. When I realized the pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. The pattern was chilling. Every few months, someone would disappear from last round. Always regulars. Always left personal items behind. Always vanished without a trace, like they'd never existed at all. The police reports were frustratingly similar. Subject was last seen at last round bar. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Investigation ongoing. None of the cases were ever solved. Not one. Has anyone ever come back? I asked, dreading the answer. Tommy looked around nervously, then motioned for me to follow him to the storage room, away from the customers, away from the other staff, away from whatever might be listening. That's the thing, he said, closing the door behind us. They do come back, sort of.
What do you mean, sort of?
A few days after they disappear, they show up again. Same clothes, same mannerisms, same drink orders, but they're different. Like they're wearing a mask of themselves.
I felt my blood run cold. Different how?
They smile too much, never blink enough. And they're cold, not unfriendly cold. Temperature cold, like they've been stored in a freezer. Tommy pulled out his phone, showing me a photograph from the bar's security camera. It showed Eddie, Maria, and Frank sitting in their usual spots. The timestamp was from that morning, just hours ago. I took this 3 hours ago, Tommy said, his hands shaking. But look at their eyes. I studied the photograph closely. Their eyes were completely black, not the pupils, the entire eye, like looking into empty sockets, filled with darkness. They're not the same people, Tommy whispered. There's something else wearing their faces. That night, I arrived at last round with a different purpose. I wasn't just cleaning anymore. I was investigating, and every instinct told me the answers were somewhere in that building, hidden in the shadows. I started with the basement. Most old buildings in Brooklyn have basements that tell stories of the past. This one was no different. Stone walls, low ceiling, the smell of decades-old moisture, and something else, something organic and unsettling. The basement was divided into 3 rooms. The main storage area, a small office, and a 3rd room that was always locked. I'd asked Jimmy about it once. He said it was just old equipment, nothing important. Tonight, I brought bolt cutters. The lock was newer than the door. Heavy-duty padlock, the kind used for storage units or tool sheds. Why would a room full of old equipment need such serious security? What were they trying to keep hidden? The lock gave way with a satisfying snap. The door opened with a groan that seemed to echo through the entire building. The smell hit me immediately. Sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in water, like something beautiful that had died. The room was larger than I expected. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Pictures of people sitting at the bar, laughing, drinking, living their lives. All the photos were in black and white, despite many being recent enough to be in color. In the center of the room was a table. On the table was a book, leather-bound, thick, with pages that looked ancient. Next to it, a collection of personal items, glasses, jewelry, clothing, all arranged in neat rows, like museum exhibits. I opened the book with trembling hands. The pages were filled with names, dates, and detailed descriptions. A catalog of some kind. Each entry included a photograph and what looked like behavioral notes. Eddie Morrison, regular since 2019, drinks whiskey neat, favors left side of bar, verbal patterns, complains about weather, mentions ex-wife Sarah, always tips exactly 15%. The entries were incredibly detailed, too detailed, like someone had been studying these people for years, learning their habits, their mannerisms, their entire personalities with scientific precision. I flipped through more pages, dozens of entries, some dating back to the 1960s, all regulars at last round, all missing persons I'd seen in Tommy's police reports, all documented with obsessive detail. Then I found the recent additions, Eddie, Maria, and Frank. Their entries were complete, including notes about their disappearances 3 days ago. The handwriting was precise, clinical. Below their descriptions was a single line in red ink. Acquisition complete. Integration successful. Monitoring ongoing.
I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy boots on wooden floors. Someone was in the bar. Someone who shouldn't be there.
I quickly photographed several pages with my phone, then closed the book. The footsteps were getting closer, moving toward the basement door with purpose. I grabbed a handful of the personal items from the table, evidence. Then I killed the lights and pressed myself against the wall behind the door. The footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs. I could hear breathing, slow, deliberate breathing, like someone was tasting the air, searching for something. The voice called down, male but wrong somehow, like it was being spoken through water or from a great distance. DeShawn, we know you're down there. It was Eddie's voice, but Eddie was missing, had been missing for 3 days. You shouldn't have come down here, the voice continued with unnatural calm. Some doors are meant to stay closed. The footsteps started down the stairs. I could see a shadow moving in the stairwell. The shadow was wrong, too tall, too thin, moving in ways that didn't match human proportions. I had 2 choices. Confront whatever was coming down those stairs, or find another way out. In the darkness, I felt along the walls, desperately for a window, a door, anything that might offer escape. My hand found a latch, a small window, probably leading to the alley behind the bar. I forced it open and squeezed through, scraping my back on the rough concrete. I emerged in the alley, breathing hard. Through the basement window, I could see a figure moving around the room. It was tall, unnaturally thin, with movements that seemed disconnected from gravity or physics. It wasn't Eddie. It wasn't human. I spent the next morning in the public library, researching everything I could find about Last Round and the surrounding neighborhood. If there was a pattern, a history, some explanation for what I'd witnessed, I needed to find it. The Brooklyn Public Library's archive section is a treasure trove of local history, newspapers dating back to the 1800s, city planning documents, census records, and police reports. I started with the building itself. Last Round had been a bar since 1952. Before that, it was a boarding house. Before that, a general store. The land had been continuously occupied since the 1820s, when Brooklyn was still mostly farmland and scattered settlements. But there were gaps in the records, missing years, where no business was listed at that address, periods where the building seemed to exist in a legal gray area, like it had been forgotten by official documentation.
I found the first missing persons report connected to the location in 1955. A dock worker named Patrick Kelly had disappeared from the bar. His description matched the pattern perfectly. Regular customer, left personal items, vanished without trace.
The reports continued through the decades. Different names, same circumstances, always connected to last round, always unsolved, always forgotten. But the most interesting discovery was a newspaper article from 1978, a feature story about Brooklyn's most loyal customers. It included a photograph of the bar's interior, with several regulars sitting at their usual spots. I recognized the faces immediately. Eddie, Maria, and Frank, looking exactly the same as they did today. In a photograph from over 40 years ago, the article mentioned their names, their occupations, their histories as longtime customers. But according to the dates, they should all be in their 70s or 80s by now. Instead, they looked the same age as when I'd seen them 3 days ago. I cross-referenced the names with public records. No social security numbers, no birth certificates, no death certificates, no driver's licenses or tax records. As far as the government was concerned, these people didn't exist, but they did exist. I'd seen them, talked to them, watched them drink at the bar night after night for 6 months. I found another photograph from 1985. Same bar, same regulars, same faces, same clothes, same expressions, frozen in time, like insects in amber. The pattern was clear. Every few years, new people would disappear from last round. Their personal items would be left behind, then they would return, but changed, added to the collection of permanent regulars who never aged, never left, never changed. I needed to understand what was happening to them, what was doing this to them. What kind of force could steal lives so completely? The answer came from an unexpected source. A police report from 1991, filed by a detective named Robert Chen. He'd been investigating the disappearances, just like me. His report contained information that wasn't in the newspapers. Chen had interviewed the bar owner, staff, and customers. He discovered the same pattern of disappearances and returns, but he'd also found something else. Something that made my hand shake as I read it. The missing persons appear to be replaced by entities exhibiting identical physical characteristics, but displaying behavioral anomalies consistent with mimicry, rather than genuine human emotion or memory. Chen wrote, recommend further investigation into possible organized crime involvement or psychological manipulation. The report was filed and forgotten. Detective Chen transferred to another precinct. 6 months later, the case was closed due to lack of evidence. But Chen had included something else in his report. A sketch of what he'd seen in the basement. A room full of photographs and personal items, a leather-bound book, and a figure he described as humanoid but possessing anatomical irregularities, suggesting non-human origin. The sketch showed a creature that was tall, thin, with elongated limbs and a face that was almost human but not quite, like someone had tried to recreate a person from memory and gotten the proportions slightly wrong. Chen had seen it too. The thing in the basement, the thing that was wearing Eddie's face. I was getting close to understanding what was happening at last round, but understanding and surviving were two different things. That night, I returned to last round, armed with knowledge and a plan. I'd spent the day preparing, researching folklore about shapeshifters and identity thieves, looking for weaknesses, methods of detection, ways to fight back. I also brought backup: a small digital camera, a voice recorder, and a GPS tracker that would log my location every 5 minutes. If something happened to me, at least there would be evidence. The bar was busy when I arrived. All the regulars were there, sitting in their usual spots. Eddie with his whiskey neat, Maria with her vodka cranberry, Frank with his beer. They looked normal, human, but now I knew better. I started my cleaning routine, but I was watching, observing, looking for the details that would confirm what I suspected, the small imperfections that would reveal the truth. Eddie didn't blink. Not once in 20 minutes. Maria held her drink, but never actually sipped it. Frank's beer remained at the same level all night. They were performing the act of being human, but they'd forgotten the small details that made it convincing. Around 2 a.m., the bar emptied except for the regulars. This was when it would happen, when they would reveal themselves, when the mask would finally slip. I pretended to clean the table next to Eddie's stool. Up close, I could see the imperfections more clearly. His skin was too smooth, like it was made of wax. His hair didn't move when he turned his head. His clothes showed no signs of wear, despite being the same outfit he'd worn for 6 months. "You're not Eddie," I said quietly. He turned to look at me. His eyes were completely black, just like in Tommy's photograph, and he smiled. His teeth were too white and too sharp, predatory.
Of course I'm Eddie, he said. Been coming here for 20 years. Ask anyone.
His voice was Eddie's voice, but hollow, like it was being played through a speaker, with the volume turned down, empty of life. "Where's the real Eddie?"
I am the real Eddie. The thing wearing Eddie's face stood up. It was taller than Eddie had been, thinner. Its movements were too fluid, like it was floating rather than walking.
Maria and Frank had also stood up. They were surrounding me, blocking the exits, up close. The illusion was easier to see through. They were copies, but imperfect ones, like photographs that had been printed too many times and lost their clarity. "You can't leave," Maria said. Her voice was monotone, without emotion. "You know too much. I need a replacement," Frank added. "Someone who fits the pattern." They were closing in. I backed toward the bar, looking for something to use as a weapon. My hand found a bottle of whiskey. It wasn't much, but it was heavy and solid.
"What are you?" I asked.
"We're what's left," Eddie said. "What remains when the original is gone." "Gone where?" "Consumed, absorbed, integrated into the collective." His black eyes reflected the bar's dim lights like mirrors. "Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll be one of us." They moved closer. I could see now that they weren't breathing. Their chests didn't rise and fall. They were animate, but not alive. Something else was controlling them. I swung the bottle at Eddie's head. It connected with a sound like hitting wet clay. The impact left a dent in his skull, but he didn't fall, didn't even seem to feel it. "That won't work," he said, the dent slowly filling back in. "We're past the point of physical damage." I ran toward the back exit, but Frank was already there. His hand reached out to grab me. His fingers were too long, too flexible. They wrapped around my wrist like tentacles. His touch was ice cold, not just cold temperature, but cold in a way that seemed to drain warmth from my entire body. I could feel myself getting weaker, slower. "Don't fight it," Maria said. "The transition is easier if you don't resist." I looked around desperately. The basement door was open. If I could get down there, maybe I could find another way out, or at least find more evidence before they got me.
I stomped on Frank's foot as hard as I could. His grip loosened just enough for me to break free. I ran for the basement stairs, taking them 3 at a time.
Behind me, I could hear them following, but their movements were different now. No longer trying to appear human, I could hear scraping, scratching, the sound of something large moving through a space too small for it. In the basement, I ran for the locked room. The door was still open from the night before. I slammed it shut behind me and looked for something to barricade it with. The room looked different. Now, the photographs on the walls had changed. They now showed me pictures of me cleaning the bar, talking to Tommy, researching at the library. They'd been watching me for days. The leather book was open on the table. My name was written at the top of a new page. Below it, a detailed description of my habits, my appearance, my personality. They'd been studying me, learning how to replace me. The door exploded inward. The things that had been Eddie, Maria, and Frank filled the doorway, but they weren't maintaining their human appearance anymore. They were tall, thin, with skin that looked like melted wax. Their faces were blurred, like features that had been worn away by time. DeShawn Reyes, they said in unison. Night janitor, former police officer, drinks to forget, lives alone. Perfect for our collection. They moved into the room. I pressed myself against the far wall, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to run. The process is simple, they continued. We take your memories, your personality, your essence, then we wear your life like a comfortable jacket. One of them reached for me. Its touch was like ice water flowing through my veins. I could feel my memories starting to fade, my sense of self becoming fuzzy around the edges. But I'd prepared for this. In my pocket was a small device I'd bought that afternoon, a high-voltage stun device. Not enough to eliminate a human, but maybe enough to disrupt whatever energy these things were using to maintain their forms. I pressed it against the creature's chest and pulled the trigger. The electrical discharge lit up the room like a camera flash. The creature convulsed, its form wavering like a television with bad reception. It worked. The thing stumbled backward, its shape becoming unstable. I could see through it in places, like it was made of smoke.
I used the opportunity to run past the creatures, up the stairs, through the bar, and out into the Brooklyn night. Behind me, I could hear sounds that weren't quite human. Roars, screams, the sound of something large breaking apart.
I didn't stop running until I reached the police station. The police didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. I was a former cop who'd been fired for drinking on the job, claiming that shape-shifting monsters were running a bar in Brooklyn. They took my statement, filed it away, and suggested I get help. But I had evidence. The photographs I'd taken with my phone, the items I'd stolen from the basement, the research I'd compiled. I gave copies to Detective Sarah Martinez, one of the few cops who'd worked with me before my life fell apart.
I'll look into it, she promised. But DeShawn, you need to consider that what you experienced might have been related to your condition.
She was talking about the drinking, the PTSD, the breakdown that had cost me my career and my marriage. I understood why she'd think that, but I knew what I'd seen was real. That night, I drove past Last Round. The bar was closed, windows dark, a for lease sign hung in the front door. According to the sign, the building had been empty for 6 months. I called Tommy. His phone was disconnected. I tried to find him online, through social media, through mutual contacts. Nothing. As far as I could tell, Tommy had never existed. The building records showed that last round had been closed since the previous owner died in a car accident. No employees, no customers, no business license, just an empty building that had been sitting vacant while the estate was settled. But I'd worked there for 6 months. I'd been paid. I had the keys, the cleaning supplies, the W-2 forms. I had proof, except I didn't. My bank records showed no deposits from last round. The keys in my pocket opened nothing. The cleaning supplies were from my own closet, old equipment from my police days. According to every official record, I'd never worked at last round. I'd never met Tommy, or Eddie, or Maria, or Frank. I'd never been in that basement, never seen that book, never been attacked by creatures wearing human faces. But Detective Martinez called me the next day. She'd visited the building, found a way into the basement. In the locked room, she'd discovered something interesting.
There's a room down there with photographs on the walls, she said. Dozens of them, all showing the same man in different situations around the neighborhood. The man looks exactly like you.
She'd found evidence, not of shape-shifting monsters, but of something else. Someone had been stalking me, studying me, documenting my life in obsessive detail. There's also a book, she continued, full of detailed notes about your habits, your schedule, your psychological profile. Someone's been planning something, DeShawn, something involving you. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, someone had been creating an elaborate false reality around me. Fake employment, fake relationships, fake memories, all designed to isolate me and make me question my own sanity. The photographs in the basement weren't of multiple people. They were all of me, taken with different cameras, different lighting, different angles. Someone had been documenting my life in incredible detail. The book contained psychological profiles, behavioral predictions, and detailed plans for something called Project Integration. According to the notes, the goal was to completely replace my identity with a constructed persona. It's like someone was trying to steal your life, Detective Martinez explained. Not just your money or your possessions, but your actual existence. The case was classified as stalking with intent to commit identity theft, but the perpetrator was never found. The basement room was cleared out, the building was sealed, and the investigation was closed due to lack of evidence. I never found out who was behind it, or why they'd chosen me, or how they'd managed to create such a convincing false reality that even I had believed it. But I had survived. I trusted my instincts, investigated the inconsistencies, and escaped before they could complete their plan.
6 months later, I'm still living in Brooklyn, still working nights, though at a different job now. Mail, a security guard at a warehouse in Queens. Quiet work, honest work. No customers, no regulars, no mysterious disappearances.
But I still think about last round, about the perfect imitations of human behavior, about the photographs and the book and the creatures that wore familiar faces. I've started noticing things I never paid attention to before. People who seem too consistent in their habits, conversations that feel rehearsed, relationships that seem artificial and constructed. How many of our daily interactions are genuine? How many of the people we see every day are exactly who they claim to be? How would we know if someone we trusted was actually something else, wearing their face like a mask? The case officially remains unsolved. Detective Martinez moved to a different precinct, and the building that housed last round was demolished to make way for condos. The basement room, with all its evidence, is gone, buried under concrete and steel. But I kept copies of everything. The photographs, the book pages, the research, hidden in a safety deposit box across town, waiting for the next person who stumbles across something similar. Because I don't think what happened to me was unique. I think it's happening all over, in dive bars and coffee shops and office buildings, places where people gather regularly, where patterns can be studied, where identities can be stolen and replaced. The creatures I encountered, whatever they were, weren't just random monsters. They were part of something larger, something organized, something that's been operating for decades, maybe longer. They're still out there, still hunting, still collecting lives like souvenirs. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I really escaped, or if the person writing these words is just another perfect imitation, convinced that he's the real DeShawn Reyes. How would I know? How would anyone know? The regulars at the last round never suspected they were copies. They believed they were the originals right up until the end. Maybe that's the most terrifying part. Not the monsters, or the stolen identities, or the elaborate deceptions, but the possibility that we're all just echoes of ourselves, performing the roles of people who disappeared long ago.
I still don't sleep well. And when I do sleep, I dream about empty bars and black eyes, and voices that sound almost, but not quite, human.
If you're listening to this, pay attention to the people around you, the ones who never change, never age, never break their patterns. Look for the small details that don't add up. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And if you ever find yourself in a place like last round, surrounded by regulars who know your name but not your story, remember this: some doors are meant to stay closed. Some questions are better left unasked. Some last rounds are exactly that. Share this story if it resonated with you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more investigations into the strange and unexplained. And remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction, because fiction has rules.